If you have seen headlines saying that green card holders are now being stopped from re-entering the United States, if you have read posts on social media claiming that permanent residents who travel abroad are being denied entry, if you are sitting there right now with your heart racing, wondering whether it is still safe for you to visit your family back home or whether you will ever be allowed back into the country you have built your life in, I need you to take a deep breath and stay with me for the next few minutes because what I am about to share with you is going to bring you clarity, calm your nerves, and most importantly, give you the actual facts that you need to make informed decisions about your immigration status and your travel plans. My name is Umar, and this is Real Guide Updates, the channel where we cut through the noise, ignore the panic, skip the rumors, and focus only on verified, factual immigration information that actually helps you understand what is happening and what it means for your specific situation. I know how stressful it is to see alarming headlines about immigration policy changes. I know how confusing it can be when everyone on social media seems to be saying something different. That is exactly why I do what I do here. My job is to help you understand the truth, nothing more and nothing less. So let us talk about this headline that has been circulating everywhere. Green Card Re-entry Stopped. DHS New Policy 2026. Just confirmed. These words are designed to make you panic. They are designed to make you click. They are designed to make you share with everyone you know. But are they telling you the whole story? Are they even telling you the accurate story? That is what we are going to break down together right now. First, let me explain something very important about how immigration news works in the age of social media. When a policy change happens, or when a memo is released, or when new guidance is issued by any government agency, the actual document is usually detailed, specific, and full of important context. But by the time that information reaches you through social media posts, through WhatsApp forwards, through clickbait articles, most of that context has been stripped away. What remains is often a sensationalized version of the truth that is technically based on something real, but presented in a way that is misleading, incomplete, or designed to generate fear rather than understanding. This is not to say that nothing is happening. This is not to say that there are no changes to be aware of. What I am saying is that before you make any decisions based on what you have seen online, before you cancel your travel plans, before you start panicking about your future in the United States, you need to understand what is actually happening at a policy level and how it specifically applies to your situation. Let me start by explaining how green card re-entry has always worked, because I think there is a lot of confusion about this, even among people who have been permanent residents for years. When you become a lawful permanent resident of the United States, you receive what most people call a green card. This card represents your status as someone who has been granted the right to live and work permanently in the United States. However, and this is crucial to understand, permanent resident status comes with certain responsibilities and expectations. One of the most important expectations is that you actually maintain the United States as your primary residence. Your green card is not a travel document that allows you unlimited freedom to live anywhere in the world while occasionally visiting America. It is documentation of your status as someone who lives in the United States permanently. This distinction matters because it affects what happens when you travel internationally and attempt to re-enter the country. Under existing immigration law, which has been in place for many years, Customs and Border Protection officers at ports of entry have always had the authority to question returning permanent residents about their travel and their ties to the United States. This is not new. This has been the case for decades. When you return to the United States after traveling abroad, the CBP officer has the right to ask you questions about where you went, how long you were gone, why you were gone, what ties you maintain to the United States, where you work, where you live, where your family is, and whether you have been maintaining the United States as your permanent home. If you have been outside the United States for less than 6 months, the process is generally straightforward for most people. You present your green card, You answer the officer's questions, and in most cases, you are admitted without any issues. However, if you have been outside the United States for more than 6 months but less than 1 year, the situation becomes more complicated. At this point, the CBP officer may look more closely at whether you have abandoned your permanent resident status. They may ask more detailed questions about your ties to the United States and the reasons for your extended absence. If you have been outside the United States for more than 1 year without a re-entry permit, you may face significant problems. Under the law, an absence of more than 1 year without a re-entry permit creates a presumption that you have abandoned your permanent resident status. This does not mean you automatically lose your status, but it does mean that the burden shifts to you to prove that you did not intend to abandon your residence in the United States. Now, what does any of this have to do with the headlines you have been seeing? This is where we need to look carefully at what has actually changed versus what has always been true. The Department of Homeland Security has been increasing scrutiny of permanent residents who travel extensively or who maintain minimal ties to the United States. This is part of a broader effort to ensure that people who hold green cards are actually using them for their intended purpose, which is to live permanently in the United States. What we are seeing in 2026 is enhanced enforcement of existing rules rather than entirely new rules that did not exist before. The authority for CBP to question permanent residents about their travel and their intent to maintain residence has always existed. What appears to be happening now is that this authority is being exercised more frequently and more rigorously than it was in the past. This means that permanent residents who might have previously passed through customs without much scrutiny may now face more questions. It means that people who have been living abroad for extended periods while occasionally visiting the United States may face challenges. It means that the gray areas that some people have been operating in are becoming less gray. But here is what I need you to understand clearly. If you are a permanent resident who lives in the United States, who works in the United States, who pays taxes in the United States, who has your home and your family in the United States, and who travels abroad occasionally for vacation, family visits, or business, you are not the target of these enhanced enforcement measures. The people who need to be concerned are those who have been treating their green card as a travel convenience, rather than as documentation of actual permanent residence. Let me give you some examples to make this clearer. If you are a green card holder who lives in Texas, works at a company in Dallas, has a lease or mortgage on your home, files U.S. tax returns every year, and you take a 3-week trip to visit your parents in India, you have absolutely nothing to worry about. When you return, you will answer the CBP officer's questions about your trip, show your green card, and be admitted just as you always have been. On the other hand, if you received your green card 5 years ago, but you have actually been living in another country for the past 4 years, only coming to the United States once or twice a year for a few weeks at a time, you may face serious questions about whether you have abandoned your permanent resident status. This has always been a risk under existing law, but you are now more likely to face these questions than you might have been in previous years. The key question that CBP officers are trained to assess is intent. What is your intent regarding residence in the United States? Have you maintained the United States as your actual home, or have you effectively moved somewhere else while trying to keep your green card as a backup option? If your intent has genuinely been to maintain the United States as your permanent home, and you have taken concrete steps to demonstrate that intent, you should be in a strong position even with enhanced scrutiny. Let me talk about some of the specific things that demonstrate intent to maintain permanent residence, because I think this is where a lot of confusion exists. Maintaining a home in the United States is important. This could be a home you own or a home you rent, but there should be a physical place in the United States that is your residence. Keeping your U.S. bank accounts open and active matters. Filing U.S. tax returns as a resident is extremely important and often overlooked. Maintaining U.S. driver's license and vehicle registration helps. Having ongoing employment or business ties to the United States is significant. Keeping your children enrolled in U.S. schools, if applicable, demonstrates your family's presence. Having your mail delivered to your U.S. address rather than having it forwarded abroad shows continued connection. On the flip side, there are things that can work against you when CBP is assessing your intent. Accepting long-term employment in another country raises questions. Enrolling your children in schools abroad suggests you have relocated. Maintaining primary residence in another country is a major red flag. Filing taxes as a non-resident or not filing U.S. taxes at all creates problems. Spending the majority of your time outside the United States over an extended period suggests abandonment. Now, let me address some of the specific rumors and misinformation that I have seen circulating about this topic. One rumor I have seen is that green card holders are being randomly stopped and having their cards confiscated at the airport for no reason. This is not accurate. CBP officers cannot simply take your green card without any basis. If there is a question about your status, you have the right to a hearing before an immigration judge. You are not simply stripped of your status at the airport without due process. Another rumor is that any trip abroad is now risky for green card holders. This is also not accurate. Routine travel for vacation, family visits, business trips, and similar purposes remains normal for permanent residents who are maintaining their residence in the United States. The enhanced scrutiny is focused on people whose travel patterns and life circumstances suggest they may have abandoned their permanent residence. I have also seen claims that there is a new rule limiting how many days per year green card holders can spend outside the United States. I have not seen any official policy establishing such a specific limit. What exists is the long-standing principle that permanent residents must maintain the United States as their primary home, and extended or frequent absences can raise questions about whether that standard is being met. There are also rumors that the government is specifically targeting people from certain countries. I want to be very clear that the rules regarding permanent resident status and re-entry apply equally to all green card holders, regardless of their country of origin. The standards are based on your individual circumstances, your travel history, and your demonstrated ties to the United States, not on your nationality. So who is actually affected by this enhanced enforcement? Let me be as specific as possible. You may face increased scrutiny if you have been outside the United States for 6 months or more. You may face questions if your travel patterns show that you spend more time abroad than in the United States. You may be at risk if you have been working full-time in another country. You may need to be prepared if you have been living abroad and only making brief, periodic trips to the United States. You should be careful if you do not have strong documented ties to the United States, such as employment, property, or active financial accounts. Who is not affected in any practical way? If you live in the United States full-time and only travel occasionally, these changes should not impact you. If you take normal vacations abroad lasting a few weeks, you should not experience any problems. If you have strong ties to the United States, including employment, residence, and tax filings, you are in a strong position. If your absences from the United States have been brief and for legitimate purposes, you should be fine. Let me talk about what you should do if you are concerned about your specific situation. The first thing I always recommend is to honestly assess your own circumstances. Where do you actually live most of the time? Where is your primary home? Where do you work? Where does your family live? Where do you pay taxes? The answers to these questions will tell you a lot about whether you should be concerned. If you have been living abroad for an extended period and you want to return to the United States to resume your permanent residence, you should consult with an immigration attorney before traveling. An attorney can review your specific circumstances and advise you on the best approach. In some cases, it may be advisable to apply for a returning resident visa, known as an SB1 visa, rather than attempting to enter on your green card. If you know you will need to be outside the United States for an extended period for legitimate reasons, such as caring for a sick family member or completing a work assignment, you should consider applying for a re-entry permit before you leave. A re-entry permit is valid for up to 2 years and protects your status during your absence. You must apply for this permit while you are physically present in the United States. If you are currently outside the United States and have been gone for an extended period, I strongly recommend speaking with an immigration attorney before booking your return travel. An attorney can help you gather documentation of your ties to the United States and prepare you for the questions you may face at the port of entry. For everyone, regardless of your specific situation, I recommend keeping good records of your ties to the United States. Keep copies of your tax returns. Keep documentation of your employment. Keep records of your lease or mortgage. Keep evidence of your community ties. These documents can be valuable if you ever need to demonstrate your intent to maintain permanent residence. Now let me provide some important context about how immigration policy changes actually work, because I think this is something that many people do not fully understand. When a new administration takes office, or when priorities shift within agencies like DHS, CBP, or USCIS, enforcement priorities can change. What was not a priority yesterday might become a priority today. This is part of how the executive branch exercises its discretion in enforcing immigration law. However, the underlying law typically does not change overnight. The Immigration and Nationality Act, which is the main federal law governing immigration, can only be changed by Congress. Executive agencies can change how they interpret and enforce the law, but they cannot fundamentally rewrite the law itself. This means that even when enforcement priorities shift, the basic rules that govern your status as a permanent resident remain the same. The concept that permanent residents must actually reside permanently in the United States has been part of immigration law for many decades. Enhanced enforcement of this concept is not the same as creating a new rule. It is applying an existing standard more rigorously than it may have been applied in the past. I also want to remind you that if you face difficulties at a port of entry, you have rights. A permanent resident cannot simply be excluded from the United States without due process. If a CBP officer believes you may have abandoned your permanent resident status, you have the right to a hearing before an immigration judge. This hearing is where you can present evidence and argue your case. The process is not instantaneous, which means you should not feel pressured into making any admissions or signing any documents without understanding what they mean. If you are asked to sign a form at the airport suggesting that you are voluntarily giving up your permanent resident status, you have the right to refuse and request a hearing. I am not giving you legal advice here because every situation is different, but I am telling you that you have rights and you should understand them before you travel. Let me also address what you should not do based on the headlines you have been seeing. You should not panic. Panic leads to poor decisions, and poor decisions can create problems that did not need to exist. You should not make major life decisions based solely on social media posts or sensationalized news articles. You should not assume that your situation is the same as someone else whose story you read online. Every case is different, and what happened to one person may not apply to you. You should not avoid traveling altogether if you have legitimate reasons to travel and you have been maintaining your residence in the United States. Isolating yourself from your family abroad is not necessary if you are a permanent resident in good standing. You should not give up your green card or assume your status is lost without actually knowing whether that is true, and you should not accept legal advice from people on social media who do not know the specifics of your situation. What you should do is stay informed by following reliable sources of immigration information. You should verify any claims you see online by checking official government websites. The USCIS website, the CBP website, and the State Department website are all authoritative sources of information about immigration policies and procedures. You should consult with a qualified immigration attorney if you have concerns about your specific situation. And you should continue to maintain strong ties to the United States and document those ties carefully. Before I wrap up, let me summarize the key points I want you to take away from this video. The headlines claiming that green card re-entry has been stopped are sensationalized and do not tell the whole story. What is actually happening is enhanced enforcement of existing rules that require permanent residents to maintain the United States as their primary residence. If you live in the United States, work in the United States, and travel abroad occasionally, you should not experience any problems. If you have been living abroad for extended periods while holding a green card, you may face increased scrutiny and should consult with an attorney. You have rights as a permanent resident, including the right to a hearing if your status is questioned. And most importantly, you should make decisions based on facts and professional advice, not on social media panic. I hope this video has given you a clearer understanding of what is actually happening and how it might affect you. My goal here at Real Guide Updates is always to give you the information you need to make good decisions and to feel confident about your immigration journey. I know how stressful this process can be, and I want you to know that there are resources and support available to you. If you found this video helpful, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications so you never miss an important update. Share this video with anyone you know who might be worried about these headlines because they deserve to hear the facts just like you did. And if you have questions about your own immigration situation, leave them in the comments below. I read every comment and I do my best to address the most common questions in future videos. Thank you for trusting me with your time and for being part of the Real Guide Updates community. Remember, immigration rules are complex, but they are not mysterious. When you understand how they work, you can navigate them with confidence. Stay informed, stay calm, and I will see you in the next video.